Good morning. I hope you're all having a great start or mid start to your day, great midweek. So I wanted to start focusing on some real core tactics that I think it's really important to start mulling over whether and this really does apply to like a marketplace or two sides of a network, but it does apply to all of any kind of business and the different strategies. But I love this book. I don't know whether you've heard of it, and it's called The Cold Start Problem by Andrew Chen. And so I wanted to focus in on a key aspect that I think it's important for any business to start mulling over and having in the back of mind, especially when you are building your MVP. And in his book, he kind of talks around the importance of network effects and focusing on getting the benefit out of having that network effect, and that's essentially virality in its core essence. It's really important when you're thinking about an app that serves your target audience, or you've got a marketplace where you've got one sort of perhaps consumers on one side and then another aspect of the marketplace on another. Like if you think of eBay, you've got sellers and then you've got consumers, or any sort of service requiring any interactions between users. So what we're talking about today is focusing on the hard side of the problem. And the reason why it's important to focus first on the hard side of the network is because once you nail that aspect, that's when it can have a more viral impact. And that is your priority, is to focus and first of all figure out what is the hard side of your business. So I'm going to take you through just some of these core insights right now. Hopefully you can see the screen okay. Let me just zoom in a little bit more. Okay, so the initial network strategy really is focus first on the hard side, deploy some of these tactics to win the hard side. Then obviously they're going to come for whatever it is, and I've called it the tool here, but they come for whatever you're offering, but then they'll stay for the whether that's the community or that's the network effect or whatever that the aspect that you essentially get them in for what they want and you sell them for what they need. Then you build in retention, and once you've got that and you've cracked the hard side, that's when you can scale. So focusing first on the hard side. So it's a two. This is specifically for sort of two-sided networks, but you can take some of these insights outside of that. But let's just focus for now, because quite a lot of you do have those two sides. So buyers and sellers. For Uber, it'd be drivers and riders, content creators, and consumers. Um, in the dating world, it would be male and female. In the hairdressing world, it would be clients and consumers. Um, in the fitness app world, it would be perhaps consumers and fitness influencers and all of those kind of aspects. So first of all, figure out what is the hard side, and it's typically a lot harder to attract that side, which is why it's important to start there first. Now, the harder side, so this is where you can kind of think about from your side, what is that hard side? It's usually smaller, it's more specialized, it's less motivated. So, for example, sellers on eBay or drivers on Uber and creators on TikTok. So, for example, let's look at why. Why is that the less motivated group? So, drivers on Uber, yes, they are going to be earning from this process. So, they're going to make money by using Uber. But from a customer perspective, the customer has a strong need for a ride, right? So they're going to, it's going to be much easier to get a customer to solve and reach out for Uber and use it, but it's going to be a lot harder to get all of the drivers on board first. So Uber would have started and focused on getting their drivers. And so for Nitto, it would be your hairstylists, right? So getting all of those on board, because once you've got that, customers like my daughter, who's desperate to get their hands on that solution, would be absolutely willing to try it and use it and test it out. So it's thinking about it from that perspective and finding out what can you do to really nail the hard side. The easier side is larger. It's the more flexible group. So it would be the buyers, the riders, or the viewers. So why focus on the hard side first? So obviously supply then creates the demand. If you have the hard side, i.e. the sellers or the drivers, the easier side are going to follow. So you need to first create that foundation. Now liquidity is critical. So if a network dies, or rather it will die if the hard side is underserved. So if you don't have any drivers, all of the riders will leave. If you don't have any hairstylists, the customers won't exist. If you don't have enough content, you won't have the consumers to consume that that content. So it's really important to think about what do you need to make it really valuable, really useful, and to create that demand. The hard side is also harder to poach once it's locked in. So for example, once you've built your app or your business and you have put all of the effort in to get the hard side there, that makes your business a lot more defensible. So if somebody were another entrance was to come into the market and say, yeah, we're going to do the same thing, if you've cracked the hard side, it's going to be a lot harder for that business to then steal your business, because you've invested in creating the right foundation first. If you haven't nailed that, then it isn't, then you haven't covered that risk. If, for example, you have demand but no if you have consumers that are really wanting, and you've got an audience of consumers, but you don't have the solution, you don't have the hairstylist or the content or effectively the drivers, it's really easy for a competitor to come in and tap into that audience and say, we've got all of the drivers, if they've already done that. So that's why it's also from a defensible perspective, why you need to focus on that first. So then you need to think about how can you get there, and different tactics for winning that hard side. So first of all, you can think about manually onboarding all of that hard side first. So really early on, recruit the hard side manually. Put a lot of effort that isn't necessarily scalable, but think about what different tactics can you do that a competitor wouldn't do to really secure that side. So there's a great story about Airbnb and how the founders of Airbnb actually went personally into the first homes and took photos of the hosts' homes, and they learnt a ton. And it's important that you also view this as your MVP and as learning and testing, because when you're spending your time close to it, you'll see what the challenges are. You'll see what insights they are, that if you were not to do it yourself, or if you were to automate it, you might miss some real nuggets here. So for example, Airbnb, the founders, when they started to do things manually, found that there was that the actual photos of the homes made an enormous difference to the success of selling the Airbnb. So it's so important to be hands-on and think about things that are not scalable. So many times we often default to, it's got to be scalable, therefore I can't go out and do it. Well, no, that's not true. In an MVP, you don't need to be thinking about scale. That's something that you can add on at a later date. Right now, you need to be thinking about learning, testing, understanding and making sure that you've got a really solid solution. And then the second point is like overserve that niche. So start with a small, really passionate segment. So eBay with collectibles, TikTok with Gen Z dancers. Think about what is your small and highly passionate segment, and then start there. Then provide disproportionate value. So this is something that we've often hear actually in some of the school communities, and often it's led by Alex Hormozy. So it's giving a lot of value, and that will ultimately build the exclusivity, the incentives, and a lot more value to the end user, which makes it harder for competitors to come in. So YouTube's partner program was an example of this, or the initial, I think they actually gave incredible value to the initial driver programs for Uber. It wasn't sustainable in the long run, but that enabled it to take off. And then solve a real pain point. So the hard side should see immediate value. So I know in some of the businesses that you guys are working on right now, it's really clear to see what the easy side or the consumer side's value is, and that solves a real pain point. But to make this work for the hard side, you have to solve a very painful problem. So focus in on what that could be and really expand on that. So the key points here are: do things manually. Don't be cutting out opportunities for yourself because you're thinking it's not going to scale. Overserve a niche. Go into finding your really passionate segment in which you're targeting, give tons of value, and then solve a really strong pain point for the hard side. Once you solve the hard side, the easy side, the demand will come and it'll be there, and you'll have much stronger business. Now, it's often that they come for whatever your tool is or your services, and then they stay for the network. Many successful networks actually act as a tool for the hard side before they actually turn into that kind of network effect. So Instagram started as a photo filter app, and then they became social. So it was a tool for their passionate segment, and then it grew into that network effect. So think about what aspect could you do that could mirror that, come for the tool and the solution for the hard side, and then stay for this new insight network effect that you haven't had before. And then the fifth part really is waiting until you scale after you've secured your hard side. That's really important. So nail it first, focus on that first, get traction in there, and then you can scale. So once the hard side is engaged, that's when you need to think about like these different growth loops to kick in. So the more drivers, you have to find what your growth loop would look like. So it's about thinking, for example, if we take Uber, you've got the more drivers you have, which means the faster pickups that there will be for the riders, which means there's going to be more riders because there's going to be more demand and more driver earnings, because the more demand there is, Uber put the money up. So the more drivers you have, the more demand that's there because it's faster pickup. Do you remember, years ago prior to Uber, it would be you have to book in a taxi, or you'd have to wait, or you wouldn't really know. And now what they did is in their app, they had their kind of hack was seeing where your taxi was. So yes, they can say it's only 5 minutes away, but the fact that they can watch it and they can see it almost, it took away that stress, and it made it an enjoyable process, but it also allowed them to do lots of different things. So the quicker a taxi can come, the better for the consumer it is, the more they can increase their price, which means the better it is for the drivers. So it's kind of like that growth loop or a kick in that really can drive scale. So think about, what is it that you could do that adds value to the hard side? And then you can later focus on shifts that balance both sides equally, but for the moment, think about trying to make the hard side succeed first. So the key takeaway really from this session is to prioritize the hard side first, do what's unscalable earlier on, and because effectively you want to try and cultivate that network effect, and without solving the hard side, the easy side won't stick around. So it's really important to focus on the hard side. Okay, I hope that's helpful. And any questions, just give me a shout. Okay, bye.